Hello, this is our lesson planning 2, and we are really getting into the nitty-gritty of lesson planning by the time you get into the assessment piece. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and here we go. You all have this PowerPoint as well because it's on your Blackboard site, as you have seen by now, I am sure. Okay, so last week, just to review, last week, we talked about what the objectives are. We're going to use the pre-K objectives. You know where they are. They're in your lesson materials week 4 folder. I've got them all in there. You can either use the link to the Oklahoma State website, or you can use the simplified piece that I put in there. Up to you. And you know that we're going to have one major objective that we're going to assess, and we're going to have 2 minor objectives that we're not going to assess. So onward. Today, we're going to look at assessment, technology. We're going to look at adaptations, and we're going to look at closure and reflection. So a full day. And this is pretty much the lecture you would get if you were in the classroom. So you're not missing out on a thing. Okay. I always start out with hooray for Diffendorfer Day. And since you are at home watching this, you can click on that yourself and listen to the book. It is the last book that Dr. Seuss wrote before he passed away. In fact, he didn't finish it. His friend Jack Prelutsky had to finish it for him. It's a terrific book. It shows the hand-drawn illustrations that Dr. Seuss put in there, and it pretty much it gives you an idea of how I feel about a great deal of assessment. I won't go any further than that. Just listen to the book and enjoy. Okay. So when you're talking assessment, you have to look at what you're assessing. What are you assessing? There are 2 types of things that you assess. You either assess a skill or you assess knowledge. When I'm talking about a skill, I'm talking about, can they count to 10? That's a skill. You can get a checklist, put all the kids' names down one side, and then you can put yes or no at the top. Count to 10, yes or no. You can assess many different kinds of skills. Can Johnny write his name? That's a skill. Check yes or no. You can assess whether or not they can recite their ABCs or identify the letters out of context. That's a skill. If you have a question about what a skill is, just say to yourself, can I assess that with a yes or no answer? If you can get a yes or no answer, it's a skill. Any questions about that, please check with me. So when you're assessing things, most of the time your math and language arts is going to be skill-based. And science and social studies are going to be knowledge-based. That's just kind of a general, it's not 100%, no, but it's a very often. How's that? So bear that in mind. Knowledge, on the other hand, is things like, well, what do we know about weather? There's not a yes or no answer to that. You can't assess, you can't say, Junior, do you understand weather? There's no yes or no checklist for that. So when you're assessing knowledge, say, for instance, you're doing a unit on spring weather, perfectly good unit. It could be a great lesson. You might be doing a lesson on rain. So your major objective is Students will identify, there's that, my favorite word, students will identify what they know about rain. That's pretty broad. You might get all kinds of answers, but you can't put it on a checklist. So we'll cover that in a little bit more detail here in just a minute. But that's the difference. A skill, you can pretty much throw it on a checklist and be done. Knowledge is a little more complicated, a lot more broad. Okay. So you're going to start out with your formative assessment. That is, what do they already know about the topic? Excuse me, dry air. So first thing you're going to do is assess what they know. Now, here's the thing. Let me just have a sip of water. When you have a skill, that's something that has to be assessed one-on-one. If you're trying to find out whether or not Johnny can count to 20, you cannot possibly assess all 24 children during whole group time to see whether or not they can count to 20, because that has to be done one-on-one. So in order to assess a skill, you're going to have to do it the week before when you're teaching your lessons. So just make sure that you identify that on your lesson plan. If your major objective is counting to 20, then you're going to say students will be assessed the week before to see if they know how to count to 20. Knowledge is different. When you're doing your formative assessment on knowledge, you are going to do that during your whole group time. After you've introduced your topic and you go into before you go into your teaching part, your guided practice, you're going to say, boys and girls, what do you know about? For instance, when I teach my boxes lesson, I would introduce my box and then I would say, boys and girls, what do we know about boxes? If this was a knowledge lesson, mine is not a knowledge lesson because mine is going to be a skill lesson when I do teach it. But if I was just doing a general lessons on knowledge about boxes, say for instance, you're doing a lesson on firemen. That's when you say, boys and girls, what do you know about firemen? And that's a general knowledge question. And they're going to pepper you with all kinds of stuff that they know about firemen. And you're going to write it down on a chart or KWL, and I'll show you more in a minute. Just so you know, both knowledge and skills have to be pre-assessed, but the time is different. Skills are pre-assessed week before, one-on-one. Knowledge is assessed the day of the lesson during whole group between the introduction and the guided practice, because you don't want to teach anything about the topic before you pre-assess. Makes sense, right? Okay. All right. So that's your major objective. You're going to pre-assess and you're going to post-assess. Time is different though. For your skills objective, you're going to do your post-assessment. You're going to have your little checklist and you're going to carry it around with you during centers. And during centers, you're going to see whether or not they've learned to count to 20. You can cross it off because they'll be practicing that in a center, or whether or not they've learned how to write their name, or whether or not they've learned how to sort, or whatever it is that your skill is that you can just put a yes or no check mark. Now, if you're teaching a knowledge lesson, like say you're teaching your lesson about firemen, you're going to wait until the closure. And during the closure, you're going to say, boys and girls, so what did you learn today about firemen that you didn't know before? So there you have it. There's a difference in your summative assessment and when you do it, depending on a skill or knowledge objective. Okay. So if you're teaching a skill, you're just going to have your little chart, and you're going to have your pre-assessment and your post-assessment, and you're going to have whatever your skill is as your title. If you just want to use initials, that's fine. If they have a student number, that's fine, whatever. I'm the only one that ever sees it. Or Dr. Legnan, if she reads your lessons too. So just no and yes, you need a pre and a post. This is what's on your clipboard, and this is what you're checking off as you're walking around when the children are in centers. The pre-assessment you've done the week before. One-on-one, make yourself a center that day and call them to you one by one so they can have their formative assessment. So if you were with me right now, I'd say select an objective and create a checklist, but you can do that on your own at home if you want to for practice. So then we have webs. Webs are great for assessing knowledge. Say, for instance, I want to do a lesson on cats. I would just make a little web and I'd say, boys and girls, what do you know about cats? And they would give me all their information. That's my pre-assessment done during whole group time. It's a great way to assess knowledge. And then during my closure, I would do my post-assessment, but for post-assessment, I would add more circles for what they've learned, but I'd make them a different color. Why? Because 4-year-olds can't read. And that way they can see and go, wow, look at all those green circles. That's all the stuff we learned today. And obviously you're going to read it to them as you go around and fill it in. And again, you can create your own if you want to for practice, or we're just going to move on. So then we have a KWL. Notice how I've got 3 different colors. Okay, my question is, I'm doing a lesson on snakes. It's a knowledge lesson. I'm doing this during my whole group time. After the introduction, I have Mr. Snake there in front of me. And I've introduced him. And now I want to know what you know about snakes. Whole group time. Well, they're scary. They hiss, they wiggle, and have eyes. Okay. Now it says here what you want to know. Now, let me just tell you, when you're doing 4s and 5s, that what you want to know is going to be really iffy. So if you want to skip that middle column, I'm good. You can just call it a KL chart, and I'm perfectly happy with it, okay? Just give me what they know to begin with, and then give me what they learned at the end. And again, different color. That's so the children see the difference. Here is what we learned. It's different from what we already knew. That's the summative assessment done during whole group time at the end. And again, you could do one for practice. Obviously, you don't have to. And then there's the Venn diagram. You know, the Venn diagrams, I don't recommend them when you're working with 4s. Probably not even 5s. I used to do this from first grade on up. For a Venn diagram, you have to contrast and compare 2 things that they already have some information about, at least a little bit. Like, for instance, here, doing a unit on insects and spiders. You know, spiders are arachnids, so they're going to be a little different. So it's fine to do that, and notice it's in 2 different colors. Again, we have what they already knew in red, and then what they learned in green. But this is something that I recommend doing with older children, not 4s. And again, you can do a Venn diagram on your own for practice if you would like. So here's another way that you can gather information. you can use graphic representations, which is artifacts. Say, for instance, you want to see whether or not children know how to write their name. You can literally give each child a pencil and a piece of paper and say, please write your name. Now, for some of them, when they're 4, you're going to have to walk around and write their name at the top after they're done, so that you know whose paper it is, because it's not going to look like their name. Others will know how to write their name, or maybe just half, but that's called an artifact. And you make sure that you have written their name on there somewhere, like on the back, and just collect it. That's your pre-assessment. And that's one-on-one. You just call them over to do the week before. And then you can actually do this during center time. If this is your major objective and you want to use artifact, you can have them do another name writing during center time and then pick that up. And that's a great summative assessment. See if they've learned how after your lessons. So for older children, if you're teaching, first, second, and third, you can have them write whatever it is that you're, make a list, write down everything you know about firemen. Collect that, have them put their name on top. That's your pre-assessment. And then at the end, have them write another list and see what they learned. It's using an artifact. We don't use it a lot. Sometimes we use drawing artifacts. For instance, with real young children, give them each a black crayon and a piece of paper. Say, for instance, you're teaching a lesson on spiders and say, boys and girls, I want you to write your name on top and then draw everything you know about a spider. And then after the lesson, have them repeat that and see if there's any additional detail. That would be a way to do that with very young children. Just another way to assess. I probably don't have to mention this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Worksheets and other cut and paste items are not acceptable forms of assessment for pre-K. Just letting you know, please do not use worksheets in your lessons that you write for me. I know kids do worksheets. They've got them coming out of their ears, that we do not need to add to their misery. Let's do something that's actually fun and meaningful when we teach our lessons. Okay, so we are going to have to quantify data, absolutely, because when you have an issue, people are going to want to know, well, what percent do they know? And you're going to have to work that out and keep records. For instance, the first one, Tiffany can identify 6 out of 10 vocab words. What is her grade? Well, it's a 60. So just know 80% and above is considered mastery. So make sure that you have your grade book out and you're recording this information. Jordan can identify 22 lowercase letters. What percentage does she know? She knows 85%. That's fantastic. So that's no problem there. Mia identifies 6 of 8 shapes correctly. What is her grade? Well, it's a 75%. So obviously you're going to have to do some reteaching. So just so you know that, make sure you're able to figure grades and record them, because there's going to come a point when you have to know what their percentage is. And it's good to collect a grade on, as you, not in pre-K, obviously, but if you're teaching first, second, and third, you're going to have a spelling grade every week, and you're going to have a math grade every week, and you're going to have a reading grade from their reading comprehension test that comes with the story every week. That's just standard. Okay, I'm a big fan of portfolios because portfolios give us a bigger picture than just a test score. So get yourself some manila folders and just put things in as you go along. I would put a math paper in every week. I'd put an example of a writing assignment in every week. I might copy a journal page and stick it in there if it was particularly great. If they'll let you, put some artwork in. I also had a blank piece of paper in each of one of my portfolios. And then I could just put sticky notes in there with things I had noticed or questions I had of the parents when they would come for conference, checklists that I'd done, photographs of works. Oftentimes I would, videos, not so much anymore, but used to, tape recordings again. What I did do was, and this probably is out of style now, but I did do a tape recording of their reading at the beginning of first grade. And then I would do a tape recording of their reading at the end of first grade. And I gave it to the parents. And it was such, people would have tears in their eyes when they listened to those. And it's a great way to record them. And you can do it on your computer. So it's not really hard to do. But it was just such a huge difference. And then artifacts, any artifacts that you collect would be a great addition. All right, you're going to do other formal assessments. There are two different kinds: criterion reference tests, which are based on what students know and can do, usually start in fourth grade, so you're not going to be doing that. However, you're going to be giving standardized tests if you are in first grade and above. We always used a standardized test in first grade when I was working, and it hasn't changed. Gave one in August, gave one in March. When you get your test scores back, you're going to have 4 different scores on there, and I'm just going to explain what each one of them is, because the parents are going to get this too. And there are many times parents call and say, can you just explain these to us? We don't know. So you've got to be able to explain those scores. There's the raw score, the standardized test score, the percentile ranking, and then the grade equivalent score. And this is the one that always gets people. So we're going to look at each one separately. Okay, the raw score is just how many they got right. That's it. That's all it is. And you can rank students with this, like who's the highest in your class and who's the lowest in your class, but it's really not comparable across any kind of test. You can't compare them to other people in other classrooms. It's just, it's really just basically a raw score, not worth a whole lot. And then there's the standardized test score, which is the raw scores that have been translated into a standardized score on a conversion table. This score allows you to compare your student in your classroom to others of the same age and grade level all across the country. And this is a little bit more valuable. However, my concern, and I do keep this in mind when I'm reading a standardized test score, is who has it been standardized on? Because it depends on where the company that printed the test conducted their trial runs. Did they do their trial runs in your state on students that are similar to the students in your classroom? Or were the trial runs done, say, for instance, you're teaching in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and that test was actually standardized on students in Portland, Oregon. Well, there's really no guarantee that those students are going to be anywhere like your students. However, that is a danger that you run into, is that it may not be as relevant to your group as you would wish. Just know that. And then we look at the percentile ranking, which is simply a percentage of others that did better on the tests. So a student that's in the 88th percentile did better than 88% of the students taking the test, that's pretty good. And then here's the one, this gets people, the grade equivalent score. So you'll get a first grader, for instance, that comes home with a 3.5 grade equivalent. So the first thing the parents say to, oh my gosh, look at that, Johnny's reading at third grade level, third grade, 5th month. And it's not. No, he's not. What it means is that Johnny is reading first grade material as well as the average third grader 5th month. It's still pretty good. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't mean he's reading at a third grade 5th month level. Just say. And you have to be able to clarify that to your parents. Okay. Next thing we're going to look at here is technology. You know, you're going to have to use some form of technology during your lessons. You can use something like ABC, and all you have to do is click on that to, you know, see all kinds of wonderful things. I don't know if you've ever used this or not. And let me just stop my share and make sure I can reshare this. I want to make sure you see this. Okay, there we go. You should see it now. And you can go in here and go to pre-K, and they can do all kinds of wonderful practices. This is great if you have a computer center, and this can be one of your centers. That's fine. But know that this is strictly skills practice. This is not knowledge-based. It's strictly skills practice. And there are lots of these sites. This is just an example. All right, let me go back in here. There are others that are a little bit more knowledge-based. Hang on a second, I'm going to get out of this. And it's just going to take me a minute. I want to make sure that you have an example in front of you. Okay. Now let me go back. And sorry, this is taking so long, but there we go. Okay. So that was just a skills-based one. Then we have some that I really recommend. I love webcams. I don't know if any of you have ever used webcams, for those of you who've been in the classroom or seen teachers in the classroom. One of my favorite ones is the San Diego Zoo, which is a live cam. And I'm not sure this is showing, so I'm going to get out and go back in. Okay. So you can actually see everything from a live point of view. This is happening right now. Let's see if the elephants are doing anything. There we go. This is the San Diego Zoo right now. So it's just all knowledge-based when you're teaching in your classroom on a particular topic. And what child would not like to see this on their screen? You can just play around with this on your own. You've got the links. Like I said, San Diego Zoo is my very favorite one, but there are many others. Okay. So next, let's go back to, let's see here. Lesson planning 2. Okay. Well, one more second. We have gone back to our live penguins here. Let's get out of this. Stop share. And well, we've lost our our PowerPoint. That's okay. We'll just get back to it. Sometimes you just have to work at it for a minute. So sorry. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so you can play with these yourself, but the Edinburgh Zoo is a wonderful zoo, and I've seen great things on there, but the problem with that is it's nighttime when you're in class. So it's really dark looking. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the lesson plan reflection. You're going to download this right alongside your lesson plans 1, 2, and 3. Make sure you hook this on to the back end of the lesson plan. And you do this for each one, lesson plan 1, lesson plan 2, and lesson plan 3, because both Dr. Legnon and I would like to see your lesson plan reflection for each one. The first step on these is planning instruction, and you can just fill in the blank because I put them on there in Microsoft Word. Go ahead and come down here and fill in what learning goal and standards did you identify for the class. So you're going to put in your major objective and the 2 minor objectives. And then how do you plan to engage students in critical thinking and student learning? Provide a rationale. Give us, when people say provide a rationale, you always give a because. I want them to learn how to count to 20. And therefore is fine too. Therefore, I am going to, whatever it is you're doing for your lesson. How do you plan to use questioning skills to promote student learning? Give a rationale. I'm going to ask them blah, 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 because. Describe the activities that you've got on your lesson, both in your guided practice where you're the sage on the stage teaching, and in these centers where they're doing independent practice. Describe how you will monitor student learning during the course of the lesson. Well, think about it. If you're doing a skills lesson and you've got your clipboard and you're going to post, you've already pre-assessed, make sure you mention when you did that, and then when you're going to do your post-assessment. Same thing with your knowledge lesson. Say you're doing a fireman lesson, then whatever you did to do your formative assessment after the introduction, and how you're going to post-assess during the closing. This is a plan. And then step 2, this is after you have taught the lesson. How did you engage students in critical thinking to promote student learning? Provide examples. Be specific. How did you use questioning skills to promote student learning? Provide examples. Remember, open-ended questions, always open-ended questions. Anytime you give a question to a student that can have a yes or no to it, it's not good. It just shuts things down. How did you monitor student learning while teaching the lesson? In what ways did evidence of learning guide your instructional decision-making while teaching the lesson? Sometimes things happen during the lesson. You see something just not working. You've got to change it real quick. That's what we want to know. Provide examples. And D, how did you use verbal and nonverbal communication techniques to foster student learning? Provide examples. Verbal communication. Did you ask the student to do something? Did you give reminders? Did you re-explain? And then there's nonverbal. You might have given someone a pat on the back or just nodded. And then there's step 3, which is reflect on your instructional strategies, interactions with students, and classroom management strategies. Discuss what went well and what areas you would revise in the future. Describe revisions that you would make if you would teach the lesson again to the same group of students. Because that way you will, it will really, it'll kind of point out to you what you would improve for next time. And honestly, every time I teach a lesson, I say to myself, I need to improve such and such and such. Okay. Any questions about this, please let me know. So then we go on to adaptations. As we discussed last week, you're going to make adaptations for the instructional materials that you're using in your lesson. That's on your lesson plan. You'll see it, double check. It's right under the Oklahoma Academic Standards and before you get to the introduction. And if you don't have children in your class that need adaptations, then you're going to make adaptations for children that are on the autism spectrum and children that are English language learners. You'll just have to pretend if all your children in your class are absolutely wonderful and perfect, everything's perfect, then you're going to use those two groups. But you're going to have to come up with adaptations because you have to get in the habit of doing that. Okay, and I just want to point out in chapter 5, and I never read the chapter to students. I feel like you're seniors in college, you read the chapters, get all that good background knowledge. But chapter 5 also talks about gifted and talented in the special needs chapter, and they really have special needs because these children are so gifted, and they may not be gifted in all areas, but they need your special intervention as well. And a lot of times teachers just load them up with extra worksheets and extra, that's not what they need. They need whatever area they're gifted in, they need to be challenged in that area. You need to give them something that's actually going to bring them higher. Like say, for instance, when I was teaching first grade, I would have kids in there who didn't know the alphabet, and then I'd have kids in there who were reading chapter books. So clearly I can't teach them all exactly the same thing. They'd be bored to death or just not know what's going on. So you find whatever group your child is going to be in, and then bring them up higher. Challenge them. The students in my classroom who were reading chapter books, I would meet with, and I'd let them read me a chapter out of their book. And then we would talk about, I'd say, can you come up with a different ending for that chapter? I want you to write a new ending. That's your writing assignment today. The other kids would have a different writing assignment. Some of them would have to write their ABCs. Some of them were practicing their name. Others were working, they were right down the middle, and they would do something that went with the story of the week. You have to be able to adapt the work to the child's needs, and certainly not just load your gifted and talented students with extra assignments. Please keep that in mind. And then there's the closure of your lesson plan. That is the very end. So this is an opportunity for children to tell you what they learned. Always, always, always begin the closure with, boys and girls, what did we learn today? Because you want to know, you want them to talk about it. Even if it was a skill, they can be proud of writing their name or counting or whatever it is they did. If it's knowledge, let them be proud about what they learned. Now, if it's a knowledge lesson, after you ask them what they learned, you're busy writing it on your KWL or your web or whatever. But ask, let them verbalize. And then you're going to end with a developmentally appropriate activity, something fun, absolutely fun. This is not the time for an educational video, so don't do it. The educational video you put into guided practice. This is just where you have the silly video to get up and dance with, or you're going to do a finger play, or you're going to read them a funny story. The important thing to this is leave them smiling. This is the last thing they're going to remember about you and that lesson. Let it be something positive and fun. So, okay, that's the closure. And I'm going to look for that fun activity at the end of your lesson plans. If it's not there, I'm going to say, leave them smiling. Where is it? Okay. So spilled milk, that's the last thing I'm going to show you today. And I'm actually going to play you a short little snippet out of a much longer video, because this gentleman who's teaching this class is just an expert teacher, and he does a wonderful job at making things real. You'll see what I'm talking about. So give me a moment. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare the video.
Let's see how teacher Jean Campbell uses these three elements to plan and lead today's group.
Well, I want to read a story, but my throat sure is dry. Doesn't your throat ever get dry sometimes? It doesn't get dry? Well, before I read, I just want to make sure I wet my throat. Don't you like to take drinks sometimes? I just have to get some milk. You need something there too, maybe after our story. I'm afraid to put my cup on. Oh. That's what I have. Where is my book? Oh, here it is. There's one thing I always have to be careful about when I read is that we don't end up. Oh, no. See, some people, see the story too. What's at least what's on the tray? Yeah, no, let's try.
Sweetheart, can't sit on the bed right now.
Well, I'll just set it over here and I'll fill it up. It's kind of a nice. Well, today the story happens to be. It looked like spilt milk. Oh, I just spilled my milk. What a coincidence. Let's find out what this story is all about. It looks like spilt milk. Sometimes it looked like spilt milk, but it wasn't spilt milk. Sometimes it looked like a rubbish, but it wasn't. Sometimes it looked like a guys, oh, you're good reading. Sometimes it looked like a birthday cake. Sometimes it looked like a sheet. Sometimes it looked like spilt milk, but it wasn't spilt milk. It was just a cloud in the sky. What were all these shapes then? Cloud in the sky. Look what that is. Boy, it's amazing what spilt milk can do. What did you say, honey? The sailboat. Oh, take it around a little bit more. Oh, a lion. Someone thinking with their head on? Looks like a seabird. What did you say, honey? The sailboat. Oh. Okay, anything else? You have a problem. I can't give each one of you spilt milk, but what I can give you is some white paint and a blue piece of paper. And that white paint is going to be your twine. you begin to paint, you need to think about what your clown is going to look like.
Judging by the children's enthusiasm, today's group was a success. The activity Jean chose was well within the children's attention span. The story he read was an old favorite, with language the children understood, and a repetitive storyline that encouraged them to join in. Jean's use of a simple prop and the enthusiasm he showed helped to hold the children.
Okay, so when you looked at that, I think you saw an expert teacher, and you saw the beginning of his lesson where he did a common experience. He spilled some milk. And that's really important, is that common experience, because not all children have seen spilled milk. And that was a wonderful way to tie in to what he wanted them to do in his lesson, which is create the picture and then come up with an oral language description of what that picture consisted of. But I wanted you to see how wonderful it was that he actually did the real life experience. That was the important part. And if you heard any meowing in the background, that was my cat. That was not in the video. So that's one of the hazards of when you're teaching online. Okay. So this is your Blackboard page this week. You're going to read chapter 5 and 11. You're going, sorry, another hazard, the phone ringing. You're going to read, like I said, the 2 chapters. You're going to download your early childhood lesson plan 3 times, because you're going to have lesson plan 1, 2, and 3. You're going to download your reflection template right on the back end of each one of those, because when you submit it, both Dr. Layden and I want them just right all in one. You've got the lesson planning PowerPoint if you want to go back to it and look at it again, and make sure you sign up for a Zoom appointment to have your lesson plan 1 approved and your lesson plan 2 approved. Lesson plan 3, you're not going to get approved because that's the one I grade. Any questions about topics, please run them by me before you waste a whole bunch of time writing a lesson that I'm not going to assign. So there you have it. You need to have your lesson plan 1 and 2 signed by me before you can teach them. Okay. Any questions, let me know. Content quiz 4 is due this week, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Again, any questions at all, let me know. I'll set up a Zoom appointment and we'll chat. Have a great week. Bye-bye.